I was just supposed to drop off an old upright piano and leave. That's it. Nothing special. But then she looked at me from across the dusty room, quiet and steady, and said, "If you're strong enough, stay and play." I didn't know that a single sentence spoken softly by a woman I had never met would stir something in me I thought was long gone. What happened that night didn't lead to a fairy tale, but it did lead me back to something far more important myself. If you've ever met someone who reminded you who you used to be, then disappeared before you understood why this story is for you, tap like to support real emotional stories and subscribe if you believe that sometimes one quiet invitation can change everything. My name's Noah. I'm 24. And for the past year, I've been stuck somewhere between graduation and survival. I studied piano performance at a small state college in Boulder, Colorado. Spent 4 years pouring my heart into keys that no one else seemed to care about. Graduated with honors, a head full of Chopin and Rachmaninoff, and no job. Turns out, loving something doesn't mean the world will love you back, especially when rent's due and you've got $23 in your checking account. So I've been piecing things together, gig by gig. I work odd jobs through a local music store, delivering old pianos, cleaning rehearsal spaces, doing basic tuning when someone's too cheap to call a real technician. On weekends, I help an old guy move instruments out of storage. It's enough to keep the lights on. Barely. I live in a one-bedroom apartment above a bakery. The walls are thin. The heat's inconsistent. There's a crack in the window that whistles when it rains. I keep telling myself it's temporary, just a phase, just until I figure things out. But if I'm being honest, I haven't touched a piano in almost 5 months. Not seriously. There's an upright in the corner of my apartment, old out of tune, always a little dusty. I pass by it every day, like it's some relic from a life I used to believe in. I used to sit there for hours, lost in music, feeling like I mattered. Now I avoid it. Because sitting down means facing what I've lost. And I don't think I'm ready for that. People keep asking me what I'm doing with my life. And the truth is, I have no idea. All I know is that I'm tired, not just in my body, but in the kind of way that makes you feel invisible, even to yourself. It was a Thursday. Cold, but not in a harsh way. Just enough wind to make your jacket collar feel useless. I was loading an old upright piano into the back of the van, a real beast. Faded mahogany keys, yellowed at the edges, one leg wrapped in duct tape. The tag on the invoice said, Boulder Canyon Drive. Not a regular route. Up in the hills. Wealthier part of town. Took me nearly 40 minutes just to navigate the winding road up there. Tall pines on either side. The kind of place where the silence feels thick. The house sat behind a line of overgrown shrubs 3 steps off the main path. It was big, but not flashy. More like something you'd find in an old novel. White shutters, green trim, ivy curling around the porch railings. I rang the bell. The door opened slowly, and there she was. Evelyn. Mid-40s maybe. Red hair pulled into a low twist. No makeup, but somehow striking. Her eyes green, steady and sad in a way I didn't understand, met mine without hesitation. She said very little. Just pointed toward a side room, with hardwood floors and old velvet curtains drawn halfway open. The space felt more like a memory than a room. I set the piano against the far wall, wiped my hands on my jeans, and started to leave. Then she spoke. Her voice wasn't loud, but it stopped me like a hand to the chest. If you're strong enough, stay and play. I turned, caught off guard. She wasn't smiling, wasn't joking, just standing there, hands loosely clasped, waiting. I mumbled something. I don't even remember what. Something about being on the clock needing to get back. She nodded just once. No disappointment. No pressure. I walked out, got in the van. But halfway down the hill, I realized I was gripping the steering wheel too tight. My heart was thudding like I'd left something behind. And I had. A sentence. A voice. A feeling I hadn't let myself feel in months. Back at the apartment, I dropped my keys on the counter and stood there for a second just listening. The bakery downstairs was closed. The building creaked the way it always did when the temperature dropped. Everything was familiar. Everything was quiet, but I wasn't. I couldn't get her out of my head. The way she looked at me. The way she said it so calm, like the sentence had waited years to find the right moment. If you're strong enough, stay and play. It played on a loop inside me. I walked over to the corner of the room. The upright piano I hadn't touched in months sat there exactly where I left it, covered in a light film of dust. One of the black keys was chipped. I knew that. I'd always meant to fix it. I sat down. For a while, I just stared at the keys, felt their silence. Then I lifted my hands and froze. There was this weight in my chest like fear, but heavier. Not fear of failure. Not anymore. I was used to failing. No, this was different. It was fear of feeling something, of letting music say something I wasn't ready to admit. Because once you let it in, once you let yourself care again, it's hard to go back to being numb. I pressed one key, then another. They echoed in the room like ghosts waking up. And for a brief second, I wanted to cry. Not because of her, not because of the job, but because I realized how much of myself I'd silenced, and how much I missed being the kind of person who could stay and play. 2 days passed. I kept telling myself to let it go. She was probably just being polite. Maybe it was one of those strange moments that don't mean anything until you give them weight. But I couldn't stop thinking about her. Not in a romantic way, not yet. More like wondering why she said it, why she asked me. What did she see? By Saturday morning, I'd made up my mind. I got in the van, drove back up Boulder Canyon Drive past the same pine trees, the same curves that made me nervous the first time. When I reached the house, I sat in the van for a good 5 minutes, just staring at the porch, wondering if I'd completely lost it. But then I knocked. The door opened slowly, just like before. And there she was. Evelyn didn't look surprised. Didn't ask why I came back. She just stepped aside and said, "It's still where you left it." Inside, the piano sat in the same spot, untouched. The room smelled faintly of cedar and tea. Afternoon light spilled through the window, catching dust in the air. She handed me a cup chamomile, no words, and sat down in a worn armchair by the wall. I stood in front of the piano. Everything in me wanted to walk out again, to keep avoiding whatever this was. But instead, I sat, laid my fingers on the keys, let them rest there like they used to, before all the noise, before the doubt. Then I played, nothing fancy, just a piece I used to practice at school. The kind that came from muscle memory more than thought. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And when I finished, I didn't turn to look at her. I just sat there in the echo of it, until I heard her whisper, "It's been quiet in here for so long." Not a thank you, not a compliment, just the kind of truth that doesn't need decoration. I started going back. Not every day, not with a plan, just when I needed to breathe. Sometimes I brought tea. Sometimes She already had the kettle on. There were no set hours, no conversations about what this was. But somehow, it made sense. The house was always quiet, but never cold. Dust still gathered in corners, but the piano stayed clean. She never told me to play. I just did. Sometimes, I'd come in, and she'd already be in that old chair, reading something worn and yellow-paged, like the book itself had a story beyond the story. She rarely asked me about my life, but when she did, she listened the way nobody else ever had, without waiting for her turn to speak. And slowly, she began to share her own pieces. She told me she used to perform Carnegie Hall once back in the late 90s, married young, gave it all up when her husband got promoted and they moved around for his job, raised 2 kids, taught piano at home when she could. Then came the divorce. Then the silence. She said she hadn't touched the piano in almost 10 years. Not because she didn't want to, but because it hurt to remember how much she once did. I didn't know what to say to that. So I said nothing. Just sat at the keys and played the simplest thing I knew. She closed her eyes, leaned back, and in that room where words didn't need to carry the weight, music did. That evening, the house felt different. Maybe it was the way the light hit the windows, or the fact that I didn't play that day. Maybe it was the way she watched me longer than usual, quieter. We sat by the window. I had brought her chamomile, and she smiled when I handed it to her, like it meant more than it should. She asked me if I was seeing someone. I shook my head. Not really. She nodded slowly, then looked out toward the mountains, like she was trying to decide whether to keep going. I used to think I knew what love was, she said. Turns out, I only knew what it cost. I didn't answer. I just looked at her, really looked. And for the first time, I didn't see the age difference. I didn't see a woman trying to remember who she used to be. I saw someone waiting to be seen. She was wearing a sweater, soft gray sleeves pushed up. Her hair was loose, falling just past her shoulders. She didn't move closer, but she didn't need to. The silence between us changed. It wasn't awkward. It was charged, like something was building that neither of us wanted to name. I shouldn't ask this, she said, barely above a whisper. But do you ever wonder if some connections happen too late, just to remind us what it feels like? My throat tightened. She wasn't asking for permission. She was offering a moment, and I could either step into it or walk away. I didn't move, and she didn't wait. I didn't move, but the air between us did. Something shifted. The silence filled with something softer, like 2 songs playing in the same key, finally finding harmony. She leaned in, not with urgency, but with a kind of quiet certainty, and I met her halfway. No fireworks, no music, just the sound of breath and 1,000 unspoken things. It wasn't about romance. It was about recognition. 2 people reaching for something they hadn't touched in years, maybe ever. When we parted, nothing looked different. The room was the same, but we weren't. She looked at me, really looked. And for a moment, I saw the question in her eyes. "You don't have to stay," she whispered. But I already had. It started with a feeling. Not panic, not dread. Just that subtle shift in the air, the way the room feels colder, even when nothing's changed. I told myself she was busy, that she needed space. We weren't anything official. We didn't owe each other routines. But I kept checking my phone, and I hated that I cared this much. By day 6, I couldn't sit still. By day 7, I wasn't pretending anymore. I drove up the canyon just before dark. Her house looked quiet, but not the usual kind. Something was missing from the air. The curtains were drawn. The porch plants were gone. No sound, no warmth, no Evelyn. I knocked. Once, twice. Nothing. I walked around to the side window, the one where I'd once watched her close her eyes to my music. Now all I saw was emptiness. No books, no piano, no trace of her. I froze. The kind of frozen where even your thoughts stop moving. I wasn't confused. I was hollow. Like the story had ended, but no one told me I was in the final chapter. I asked a neighbor. His answer was simple. She left, quiet, didn't say where. That night, I sat in my van, longer than I care to admit, trying to piece it together. What did I miss? Did I scare her off? Was I just a moment of nostalgia? She regretted. I reached for my bag, and there it was. A folded page slipped where I never would have noticed until now. Her handwriting, a melody, untitled, at the top, for the boy who stayed. And that hurt more than if she'd said goodbye. She didn't take much with her. No suitcase I saw. No trail. Just silence and a melody she never meant for anyone else to hear. And yet she left something in me I hadn't felt in years, a sense that maybe I wasn't broken, just buried. Under fear, under doubt, under time. She reminded me that connection isn't about permanence, it's about recognition. And sometimes the people who change us the most don't stay to witness who we become. I don't know where she went. I don't know if she ever thinks of me. But I still play that melody quietly some nights when the city feels still enough to listen. And in those notes, I remember who I was with her and who I might still become because she saw something in me when I'd forgotten how to see it myself. Have you ever met someone who walked into your life quietly but left you carrying questions you might never answer? Not regrets, not bitterness, just a quiet ache where a moment used to live. Some stories aren't about forever. They're about what changes inside you in a single chapter. And maybe that's enough. If you've ever felt seen by someone who couldn't stay, or if you've ever been the one who had to walk away, this story was for you. Share your thoughts below. Who was your Evelyn? Or were you someone else's Noah? And if this story left something behind in you, tap like to support true emotional storytelling and subscribe to hear more moments that remind us how human we really are. Because sometimes all it takes is one quiet melody to change everything.